how the Iranian government treats certain groups. And the Baha'i do have legitimate gripes and grievances with the government for not giving them constitutional rights. So I wouldn't consider their criticism of that government as Islamophobic. But equating that government to a representation of Muslims in Islam would not be accurate. Iran, unfortunately, has been a big player in the attacks in Syria and defending the Assad regime. And so many, countless Muslims have died because of their intervention in that country. So I have, and the Muslim community, both Sunni and Shia, have huge criticisms of that country. But equating what Iranian supreme leader does, or what the Iranian government does to what Islam stands for, it isn't accurate. So I think that's how I would address it. And then there are other groups, Christian groups, minorities that have been impacted. But again, those governments really have their own agendas and political views that are inspiring that action, and it's not the religion of Islam or the tenets or the beliefs of Islam that advocate for those issues. And it always comes down to looking at the text, looking at the commentary in an accurate way. Everything in translation gets lost. So people will quote something from the Quran or some kind of saying and say, oh, look, no, this is what you believe in, but don't look at the general context of when it was said, even if the Muslim community or the majority of Muslim scholars think that statement is accurate. Because again, it was said 1,400 years ago, and through its passing in each generation, if that has legitimacy. So I think when you're looking at these different government actors and what they're doing and equating that to Islam, again, that has the foundation of Islamophobia, and I wouldn't equate their actions to that.
Just a quick follow-up.
Sure.
But the Christians in Iraq and Syria specifically who are subject to basically a campaign of genocide, what would you say to them? I mean, who is responsible for that?
The government that was also responsible for the genocide committed against the Shia community and during the Saddam Hussein regime. And then the Shia community, or the Shia leaders who took over after the Saddam Hussein regime and did the same to the Sunni community. Even those Christians who were being impacted, the Yazidis who were being impacted, what happened to them, I don't think could be justified by anyone. But those actions aren't Islamic. I don't think anyone would argue that Saddam Hussein was a Muslim or a good Muslim at that. And I would say I feel for them, again, for their sorrow, for their loss. And as an organization that serves the domestic community in the United States, we don't really get involved in those actions, and I'm not an expert by any means, but just as a Muslim American, I couldn't even fathom the kind of actions that they've gone through. But again, like the previous question alluded to, Muslims have been even hurt and victimized at a higher extent by those same communities who are attacking these individuals.
And how can people who aren't Muslim help the Muslim community to fight against Islamophobia here locally?
So one thing that we're really working on, and I'm hoping it'll come through on July 8th, we're going to have a bystander intervention training. We saw that what happened in Portland, and those three heroes that really stood up for one Muslim individual and the other African-American individual who was on that train. So that's one thing that we thought, okay, let's get a curriculum together. We're going to be getting training for our staff and for our volunteers, and then we're going to go out throughout Orange County, throughout LA, the IE, and give those trainings to other individuals. There's a lot of individuals who have expertise, whether it's in law, you might be a lawyer, you might have graphics or media expertise. You don't have to be Muslim to, again, come and contribute, whether it's finding out about the issues, writing a letter to the editor, writing op-ed, getting to know or going to a mosque and like there's a circuit right now, this Ramadan, and there's Latinos and Muslims who have partnered together to have these taco trucks going around at different mosques, and people who are Muslim and non-Muslim are attending and just getting to know a Muslim. Studies have shown once you do get to know a Muslim, those misperceptions of those stereotypes are normally washed away because you see how they interact in their daily life. And I think just getting to know another Muslim will go a long way. But get on CARES listserv, look out for our action alerts, look out for our volunteer opportunities. We have more than enough work. This administration is keeping us busy, and there's tons of ways that you can contribute.
Exactly. I wanted to ask you a question about something you kind of touched on. Whenever I get into a discussion about Islam and Islamophobia, I have gotten a number of people who have said to me, yes, but where have the Muslims been when bad things have happened? I haven't seen them demonstrating, I haven't, you know, they claim that that is not their belief system, but they're strangely quiet when something happens. And you touched on the fact that this is not well represented in the media. Can you address that?
Yeah, sure. It's something that we've heard a lot. And my first response to that individual who's doing that criticism is, where are you getting your news from? And who do you follow on, whether it's a listserv or social media, and just looking at the numbers. I think our national office actually ran a report or has a page on their website. I'll look into it and I'll email the organizers so they can forward it to you all. There's a listserv of after each attack, how many Muslim leaders come out and stand against it, stand in solidarity with the victims. And the number is honestly astonishing. It's just, that's not a good story for the media to cover, right? When this is happening, when the chaos is ensuing, whether it's Fox News or even CNN, it's much better to feed into the hysteria because that's what's gonna get to your viewers. But I think since 9/11, there has been, to such a large degree, the Muslim community and Muslim leaders coming out and saying, I do not stand with this, this isn't representative of my faith, and this defensive approach, that within the Muslim community we're saying, like, how much more can we do? We've been doing it for so long, and we're still getting the same criticism. And I don't think there's ever going to be a buy-in from mainstream media to say, okay, let's get coverage on this, because it'll kill the story. It's like, yes, 0.00001% of a group who, again, the majority says doesn't even belong to me, their actions aren't representative of what I believe in, is calling, like, they're calling out that small group. Then where is the story? Where is that, okay, we're not going to go in. Once you say that, you're not going to go invade a country. You're not going to take more money and allocate it to the FBI to go and target mosques, to target Muslim communities. Because then you look at the real facts and say, no, this is actually that big of an issue. Domestic terrorism within the United States from white supremacy groups, by the FBI's own admission, is a much bigger issue than Islamic terrorism.
Right.
But I don't think anyone really wants to look at those facts because it doesn't fit that agenda, and it doesn't fit the deep pockets that are profiting from Islamophobia.
Well, thank you.
No problem.
Well, I just want to add that, it's absurd that 1.6 billion people should even be thought of as having to answer for, a wacko. I'm just thinking of last week's event. I myself, very progressive, leaning, anti-Trump, anti-Republican. If anyone suggests to me that the wacko who shot the congressman this week in any way speaks on my behalf, you'll get the middle finger and some, choice words thrown at him. But yet that's exactly what is, implicit in a number of the questions that I heard just now. It's totally absurd. And the other thing that you might want to think about is, who is fighting and dying against ISIS at this present time? It's not Christians. Who's actually doing the fighting? It's overwhelmingly Muslims. So
Two great points.
Those comments.
You're not going to hear argument on my
No, it's not a question. It's a comment.
Go ahead.
With the upsurge in all these laws, the religious rights have been pushing in the guise of freedom of religion, you know, school voucher and all that stuff. What's the Muslim community taking that? Are you guys gonna take advantage of those laws? Because they don't say it's only Christian, right?
I don't think they say it, but I think it is implied that it's only Christian. We've actually,
We're to combat it, you know, let's all jump on board.
yeah, no, there was, when the first leak about the Religious Freedom Act and how it impacted the LGBT community came out back in January, around the same time that the Muslim ban stuff was happening, we actually sent a representative to a rally stating that we would stand with the LGBT community. And we would, any kind of civil rights violation that impacts them is a civil rights violation that we wouldn't stand for. Because again, we're, as a domestic civil rights organization, we're standing up for the civil rights of all Americans. So that holds true, and if there's, I think the beauty of this country is you can practice your religion, you have the freedom to do that, but there's no compulsion in it too, and the state and the church need to remain separate, and I think that's something that the Muslim community would advocate for. And we've been the target of civil rights abuses for such a long time that us getting behind another group, whatever the religion is, isn't going to be a hard sell. We've done the same thing with the executive orders that came out and targeted the Latino community with the wall. And we will continue to do that. So I don't think there's going to be any pushback from the Muslim community. And we know better than to trust this administration with any advantages that they want to do.
Kind of tongue in cheek. So.
From what I've read and heard, it seems that the Muslim religion stems from the fact that when Muhammad died, we didn't leave an heir. And so it's been this conflict between Sunni and Shia, and then we have Alawites, and you have other kind of factions. When you go to a mosque, any mosque, where are these religious leaders trained to understand? It seems that here in America, you've been more socialized into the American way of life. But from what I've heard, it's not so much so when you go to Europe, that the Muslim community has not been as we have been more accepting here than they have been in other areas. Now, when you go to UCI, what is the Muslim community doing to stem the tide between this anti-Semitic feeling between the Muslim students and the Jewish students? You haven't approached that. You're talking it only from the Christian point of view. But they have been attacked in UCI and in other campuses. What are you people doing to stem that kind of hatred here in this country?
Sure. So I think there's a couple of different points that you made. The first is talking about the difference between Sunnis and Shias, which 90% of Muslims follow some form of Sunni school of thought, and about 9 to 10% follow the Shia school of thought, with other making like 1% of that. So that was one issue. Then you're talking about the issues at UCI, and I think the conflict between Muslim students and Jewish students. And was there any other issue that you'd want me to address, or are those the only two?
Well, I want you to address that. What is going on, and how are the Muslim community going to deflect this anti-Semitism that goes on not only in UCI but across campuses in the United States? So these factions are also contribute to this here in this country.
So I'm going to speak from, again, personal experience and then some of the advocacy work we've done at UCI. I'm actually a UCI graduate, went to undergrad there and ended up going to Davis for law school. And I come from a family where my mom is Shia and my mom's Sunni. My mom is Shia and my dad's Sunni. So I kind of have, even though I'm no religious expert and that's not something that I can speak on, I can touch upon that after I touch on the issue at UCI. So I don't know if you all remember, this was probably back in 2011, 2010, when Michael Oren had come on campus at UCI. and then he'd spoken, a couple of Muslim students from the MSA got up in protest, and then they ended up being prosecuted by the DA in the Orange County. I don't see any justice in that, and we did advocate for those students at that time. We didn't actually represent those students. They got their own attorneys, but on the ground, CARE was organizing because those individuals had free speech and First Amendment rights that we thought were being violated. And again, we thought that they were being prosecuted in a way that no other community would have been. It was a targeting of the Muslim community, and we've seen that across campuses. In the name of anti-Semitism, oftentimes Muslim student speech is hushed down and suppressed. I don't think any Muslim would support any views of anti-Semitism, but views of anti-Semitism and criticism of the Israeli government are two complete separate things. And criticism of Zionism, again, is completely separate from criticism of the Jewish faith. The Muslim community shares a lot of similarities with the Jewish faith, being an Abrahamic faith, and we are mandated to respect not only the prophets, Abraham, Moses, but also revere the books, the Old Testament. So saying that the Muslim faith in any way supports anti-Semitism, I would say is 100% false. But there is a large portion of the community that sees what's going on in Palestine and Israel and how individuals and families are being impacted there. And then they come and they use their First Amendment rights and their speech to speak out against that. And then that is being taken and construed as anti-Semitism. And I don't think it's fair to those students. And what we've seen administrations do over and over and over, they come to the defense of the Jewish community, but they don't give the Muslim students there the same ability to use their First Amendment rights. So I think it's just a matter of equity when dealing with the two. As long as it's speech, there's no violence, there's no threats, the universities are supposed to be places of open dialogue. And I think one thing that's been lost, unfortunately, recently is the ability to engage in a civil manner. And you have a difference of opinion, I have a difference of opinion. As long as we're not, again, spewing hate, we're not threatening anyone, we should be able to, especially on our universities, talk about those issues. Coming back to the Sunni versus Shia issue, thankfully in the United States, we have, again, a constitution that says we can practice our religion and that we don't have a government telling us what faith or what school of thought you should be following. In the Middle East, a lot of individuals don't have that same ability. And so you'll see a lot more Muslims come out openly and say stuff like Sunnis and Shias should get together. We have terms like sushi, which is like Sunni and Shia, that I stand in support of sushis. And it's like we have that ability because we have the First Amendment, we have the ability to practice our faith and talk about it in a way that we can. So you'll see that. In Europe again, I think it's how the media there is demonstrating. There's like talks about the city is run by Sharia law or Sharia courts, and there's no validity to that. There hasn't been proven, but again, it's a spin that the media and some of these fake news sites are spitting out. So again, I don't think that's the case, but again, I don't have that expertise because I work on domestic issues in the U.S., so I think that's the best answer that I can give you.
Mitchie, could I throw something back to her question here? Because I used to teach at UCI from 1998 to last year. And for the last 10 years, I've been attending these events that she referred to, both the pro-Israel events and the pro-Palestinian events. And I was at the Oren event, which was a total disruption. And I was at an event, pro-Israel event, on May 10th that was disrupted by Students for Justice in Palestine. Granted, you're correct when you say that anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism or anti-Israel can be separated. However, I can state from my own personal observation that many, not all, of the speakers who have come at the anti-Israel week of events every May at UCI have spouted vitriol that goes far beyond criticism of Israel, and it absolutely